12. Trespassers throw house party in mansion. In 2022, a wealthy homeowner from northern Florida was outraged after a random person broke into their $8 million mansion and threw a party for over 200 people. Speaking with Fox News 2 months after the unauthorized event, the owner described how the guests helped themselves to whatever they wanted at the Santa Rosa Beach property, including her jewelry, clothing, handbags, and what was inside her fridge. Disturbing video clips from that night revealed the young attendees turned the foyer of the 5-bedroom, 8-bathroom home into a boxing ring. They also drank a 1,500 bottle of Ace of Spades champagne, along with other expensive liquor. In addition to being angry about the break-in, the mother of 4 and her oil executive husband were furious when no arrests were made, especially since many of the trespassers' faces are clearly visible in the footage. Several of the partygoers were allegedly identified, yet for some reason the police failed to take action against them. There was also obvious evidence of a break-in, considering the fact that the intruders had to pry off 3 locks just to get inside. In fact, they even planned the event ahead of time by passing out flyers for the party. The crowd dispersed when security finally showed up, with many guests snatching items as souvenirs on their way out. Some of these included a $3,500 Yves Saint Laurent purse, a football signed by Peyton Manning, and a PlayStation 4. The family returned to find their Palacio home trashed and their daughter's American Girl doll collection all over their roof. Around the same time, the family complained to the news. Authorities announced that the suspects would finally face charges in connection to the incident. And while it may do very little to restore the homeowner's sense of safety, at least there's a chance at justice. 11. Shannon Cool Mom O'Connor. In late 2020, officials at Los Gatos High School in California's Bay Area received a report about a mom named Shannon O'Connor, who was allegedly throwing wild drinking parties for underage teenagers. The complaint came from a concerned parent who said that her daughter overdosed on edibles in the presence of O'Connor, who was also accused of buying illegal substances for minors. 2 months later, in 2021, another parent sent the school an email about O'Connor, including accusations that the mom in question had inappropriate contact with multiple partygoers, and on more than one occasion too. The parent also claimed that the woman groomed adolescents for her own sick pleasure. An investigation found solid evidence that O'Connor told the teens who attended her parties not to tell their parents. On one occasion, a young man went back to his house in such a highly intoxicated state that he was projectile vomiting everywhere. He also nearly drowned in his family's bathtub. Paul Robinson, the acting interim principal at the time, sent staffers an email describing the problem as something parents expected the school to handle when it was more appropriate for the police department to deal with. But O'Connor's inappropriate conduct even extended onto school property, including on one occasion when she allowed a student to drive her SUV without a legal driver's license. A car surfing teen subsequently fell off the vehicle and was apparently vomiting 4 days after, thanks to a concussion. Finally, in October 2021, almost a year after the first complaint was filed, O'Connor was hit with 39 criminal charges relating to her absurd behavior in the presence of teenagers. She's being held without bail while she awaits trial, and things apparently aren't going well for her at the county facility, where she was allegedly beaten up by 5 of her cellmates in early 2023. 10. Rowdy rapper. In early 2022, police received a call complaining about a bunch of people throwing bottles at passing cars from a house party in Miami. Officers got to the scene and found the rapper, I Love Memphis, shirtless and absolutely reeking of booze. According to law enforcement, his speech was slurred and he seemed obviously intoxicated out of his mind. He failed to identify himself after being asked for his name multiple times, so the officers tried to take him into custody. They later accused the musician of screaming and physically resisting when they tried to handcuff him and put him in the back of a squad car. When they finally got the young man in a vehicle, he allegedly called one of the officers an inappropriate name and hurled a few other insults. Because of this, I Love Memphis was booked on charges of resisting arrest and disorderly intoxication. 9. Carolyn Wynand. After getting a call about an out-of-control party one night in 2014, police officers in Naples, Florida busted the host, 18-year-old Mariel Wynand. According to responding officers, the young woman came to the front door with the help of 2 friends since she was too inebriated to answer it by herself. In fact, she could barely even stand without help. Mariel then gave the officers a phone number belonging to her mother, 56-year-old Carolyn Wynand. When Carolyn answered their call, she seemed surprised about the party and claimed she was out of town at the time. She gave the officers permission to kick out anyone who wasn't supposed to be at the house, but as they went in and began searching the dwelling, they actually found Carolyn herself inside, along with 20 underage guests. After realizing that she'd been caught red-handed, Carolyn tried defending her decision to throw the party, claiming that the guests were safer under her roof and her watchful eye than they would have been if they'd gone somewhere else. But the police saw the situation much differently, and they made it a point to mention that Carolyn was lucky none of the partygoers tried to drive home drunk that night. Because if that had happened, and if anyone had gotten in a crash and hurt someone, she would have faced a lot more serious charges. Even without that, she was hit with 26 counts of selling, giving, or serving alcohol to a minor, while Mariel was charged with hosting an open house party. While the outcome of the case is unclear, it seems as if the mother-daughter duo has moved past the wild incident. The elder Wynand's career as a successful realtor has remained intact, while it appears as though Mariel is working hard to be an actress in Los Angeles. 8. The Boylan family. Law enforcement arrested 3 members of a family in 2017 after getting a report about possible criminal activity at a house party in Williamsburg, Michigan. Grand Traverse County Sheriff's deputies were told that the illegal celebration happened at the home of Jeffrey and Dwayne Boylan and their 18-year-old daughter, Hannah. According to records, Jeffrey was a sports coach for a local high school at the time. Several teens who claimed to be at the party told investigators that they paid a $5 fee for pizza and booze. They said the family's basement bar was fully stocked with adult beverages, and the people were playing a couple of drinking games. There were also rumors about Jeffrey having inappropriate contact with one of the party guests that night. But because the person was of legal age, no charges were brought against him for it, which seems wrong if you ask us. The family was charged with selling alcohol to minors, and Dwayne and Hannah each face an additional charge of allowing a minor to consume alcohol. Dwayne ultimately pleaded guilty to 1 count of furnishing alcohol to a minor, which came with a short jail sentence of up to 30 days. Jeffrey pleaded guilty to 3 counts of furnishing alcohol to a minor, and he faced up to 60 days in jail. He also left his position as a high school sports coach before they would have to fire him. Hannah took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of being a minor in possession of alcohol. In exchange for her plea, she got a deferred sentence, which means she had to abide by certain rules and avoid further legal trouble for a set period of time. 7. Partygoer wakes up in wrong place. A Scottish man went to a house party in April 2019 and ended up passing out on the sofa, only to wake up at a house he didn't recognize at all. Obviously, he must have entered the home in a drunken state, and he awoke to 2 strangers standing over him, confused. According to a video that went viral on social media, the man left a party with plans to grab a cab to take him home. But the taxi never showed up, so he decided to return to the party, except he went to the wrong house. He made something to eat and passed out, completely unaware that he was in a stranger's home. Luckily, the household members saw the humor in the situation. Instead of calling the police and getting him arrested, which they probably could have done if they wanted to, The couple who lived at the house simply woke the man up and asked him who he was, and he responded that he was at the party the night before. The homeowner explained to the confused visitor that there was no party at the home, at which point he realized he must have entered the wrong house. Whoops. 6. Mormon mom loses moral compass. Rachel Lenhart was a 35-year-old mother of 5. She was a once devout Mormon and served as a Sunday school teacher when she decided to host a house party at her Evans, Georgia home in 2015. She threw the bash for her underage daughter and the young woman's friends, and was later accused of letting the guests drink alcohol and play naked Twister. After that, Lenhart allegedly went into a bathroom with an 18-year-old man for some intimate, private time. It may sound like things couldn't have gotten worse from that point forward, but they actually did. According to several witnesses, Lenhart put on a rather obscene performance in front of minors in the living room after she came out from her bathroom session with the young boy. She realized her behavior was unacceptable after being confronted and vowed to quit drinking, a habit she picked up after separating from her husband. Lenhart eventually started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and told her sponsor about the things she did at the party. Unable to keep silent about the disturbing and illegal details, the sponsor reported Lenhart to the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, and an investigation was officially launched. Authorities ultimately charged her with 2 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and she'll lose custody of all 5 of her children pending the outcome of the case. Lenhart was sentenced to 6 years probation. Through her attorney, she reassured the public that she was committed to staying sober and getting the help she needed to stop her from behaving in such an unacceptable manner ever again. Anonymous source close to the woman told the New York Daily News that part of Lenhart's problem with alcohol could be traced to her upbringing in the Mormon Church, which has strict rules against drinking. She had little to no exposure to alcohol before she started drinking as an adult, and didn't understand her limits like a more experienced drinker who experienced in their youth might. Regardless of whether or not the handful of bad decisions she made can be blamed entirely on alcohol, it was clearly a wise decision for her to quit the bottle. 5. Floor collapses at roof party. One night in 2022, an estimated 150 teens were at an 18-year-old's birthday party at a home in Arapahoe County, Colorado, when the guests began jumping up and down in unison. In a horrifying turn of events that was entirely captured on camera, they bounced up and down so hard that the force of their combined jumping caused the floor to cave in and send the partygoers plunging down into the basement. A harrowing call between first responders described the confusion of the scene as officers tried figuring out what actually happened. One of the partygoers could be heard saying that the police thought there were people trapped in the basement and that they noticed the distinct odor of natural gas coming up. According to the sheriff's office, the party was thrown in honor of the homeowner's grandson. Cass Henry, who attended the bash with his brother AJ, told local station KKTV that they could hear the floor breaking apart well before it caved in. He said that he found out about the party through social media and that it simply got out of hand since too many people showed up. Henry broke his ankle in the collapse and was among a handful of guests who were injured, none of which were life-threatening, thankfully. As it turned out, the collapse severed a gas line and caused a leak, hence the horrible smell. Luckily, the gas was turned off in time to prevent any further damage or injury. But the house was declared unfit for occupancy after the accident, and the homeowners had no choice but to move out while it was being repaired. And while it isn't exactly an everyday occurrence for a floor to collapse during a wild house party, it's not actually unusual either. The same thing happened in 2018 at an off-campus apartment complex near Clemson University in South Carolina, where dozens of college students gathered for a homecoming party and were jumping up and down. This collapse ended up a little worse than this one in Colorado though, and 30 people had to be rushed to the hospital. None of their injuries were life-threatening and nobody became trapped in wreckage. It seems both situations were close calls. 4. Tough-talking teens become threatening. When two girls started fighting at a house party in Laredo, Texas in early 2023, a pair of young men allegedly pulled out guns. According to a police report, 18-year-old Miguel Turrubiates was armed with a BB gun, and 19-year-old Elias Benavides also had a weapon. Officers responded to the scene after getting a report about an aggravated assault. When they arrived, a woman told them that her nephew was throwing a party at the home when an altercation suddenly broke out between 3 women and 2 men. She said she was trying to break up the fight when Turrubiates pulled a gun out of nowhere and started wildly waving it around, threatening people. Thankfully, a fellow partygoer managed to disarm him and noticed that the weapon was just a BB gun. At that point, Elias Benavides allegedly tried to pull his own gun from his waistband, but he got stuck and someone punched him in the face before he could get it fully out. He fell to the ground according to an affidavit and then stood up and pulled the gun. The woman who spoke to responding officers said that Benavides pointed it in her direction and shot at the ground several times. He then accidentally shot himself in the leg and fled the scene. Authorities tracked down and charged Benavides with 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. They also arrested Turrubiates on suspicion of terroristic threat of imminent serious bodily injury. Seems like these guys won't be invited to the next get-together. 3. Annual Mayhem event lives up to its name. Mayhem at Lake George is the name of an annual party that happens in Lake George, Florida, about 40 miles west of Daytona. For the most part, it's like any other typical lakeside celebration. Dozens of boats gather near the shore, and hundreds of people flock to enjoy music and drinks. But the festivities took an unusual turn back in 2022, when a violent fight between multiple partygoers broke out, leaving one man seriously injured. Shocking footage of the violence shows several males throwing punches and tackling each other near the DJ deck. Recordings of radio conversations between first responders revealed that one man actually fell unconscious and was bleeding profusely from his face. He was taken to land by boat and then airlifted to a hospital to get treated. Volusia County deputies and members from a few other law enforcement agencies responded to the scene. They issued 38 boat citations and 108 warnings in the initial aftermath of the brawl, and 5 people were arrested, including 2 for disorderly conduct and 3 for boating while drunk. Authorities said that more charges could come pending the outcome of an ongoing investigation, but it's unclear whether any arrests have been made. Shortly after the incident, the press reported that the injured man planned to press charges against the person who hurt him. During an interview with local news station WESH 2, Sheriff Mike Chitwood described the ordeal as something that can usually be expected when there's a large number of people and alcohol involved. 2. Parents arrested in prep student tragedy. In May 2022, students from a local prep school were partying at a home in Shelton, Connecticut, when what was supposed to be a fun night quickly took a devastating turn. The guests were drinking, and not surprisingly, at some point, a fight broke out between 2 men. Before anything serious could happen, the altercation was broken up and the party ended. The teens apparently weren't ready to call it a night yet, so the fight continued elsewhere. The chaos finally ended with the fatal stabbing of a young man named James McGrath. Police arrested the suspected killer, Raul Valley, on suspicion of murder, and the investigations continued well into 2023. In March, authorities announced that they arrested the parents of the student who hosted the party. 59-year-old Paul Leifer was charged with letting minors possess alcohol. His wife, 51-year-old Susanna Leifer, was hit with the same charge, as well as an additional count of second-degree reckless endangerment. The exact nature and extent of the Leifer's involvement is still unclear. According to an affidavit, Susanna had some questionable interactions with some of the guests before the stabbing. After the fight, the couple allegedly went to another party nearby where the stabbing happened. 1. Models and mind-altering substances. In 2023, After attending a party in Las Vegas, several models believed that they had been drugged without their knowledge. One woman who reported her suspicions to the Las Vegas Metro Police Department said that she and others were hired as atmosphere models. In other words, they were paid to add beauty and excitement to the event. The party was initially supposed to be at a nightclub, but it happened at a warehouse after a last-minute change of venue. During the event, the woman said that a man who identified himself as Leon Gong ordered coffee to the models. It seemed harmless, so they took him up on the offer. But they started to feel strange immediately after they drank the coffees, even though the drinks were never out of their line of sight. Gong then approached the women with a platter holding party favors. In other words, illegal drugs like cocaine and ecstasy. The model, who filed the initial complaint, revealed that she went to a drug testing facility right after the event, where she tested positive for MDMA. She also showed the police text messages she exchanged with the person who hired her, who reportedly blamed the incident on a miscommunication due to a language barrier between Gong and the models. Using the information provided, including Instagram photos, investigators identified the suspect as 38-year-old Zhu Gong, not Leon. Officers arrested Gong at his workplace and hit him with several charges relating to poison and possession of a controlled substance. 11. Nathaniel Mangrum. Nathaniel Mangrum was celebrating his 31st birthday at a bar and lounge in Wilmington, Delaware in 2016, when Tyron Griffin took the DJ's microphone to offer a birthday shout-out. Griffin then shot Mangrum and his friend Kavez Tolbert. Mangrum died from his injuries, but Tolbert survived 2 gunshot wounds. During Griffin's trial murder, Tolbert testified that he and Mangrum went to the bar knowing Griffin would be there. There was tension between the two parties over a past issue, and Tolbert tried to aggressively confront Griffin earlier on in the night, but said that Mangrum held him back. Security also intervened, and Tolbert let the matter go for the time being. But when Griffin took the mic to wish Mangrum a happy birthday, Tolbert said he knew it wasn't a normal birthday gesture. As soon as gunfire began, everyone inside the building rushed toward the exit. After they cleared out, the bartender found Mangrum bleeding on the floor from his head and abdomen wounds. Griffin turned himself in 5 months after the shooting. He managed to avoid a first-degree attempted murder conviction and was instead found guilty of manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and weapons-related charges. This would normally come with a lighter sentence than a murder conviction, but Griffin received a 90-year term under Delaware's habitual offender law. Have you ever gone somewhere looking for drama with a certain person who you knew it would be best to avoid? Let us know in the comments below, but hit that subscribe button first. 10. Coy Wayne Westbrook. After going through a divorce in 1997, Coy Wayne Westbrook held on to the hope that his ex-wife Gloria Jean Coons would become open to rekindling the relationship. One night, Gloria invited him to her house in Channelview, Texas, for what he thought would be an opportunity to reconcile. He went over there, hoping they'd fall in love all over again. But he arrived to find a party going on and was met with guests who immediately told him that Gloria had just slept with another man in her bedroom, and they seemed to enjoy delivering the painful news to the heartbroken man. Later on that evening, Westbrook reportedly entered Gloria's bedroom and saw her going at it with 2 men. Guests continued to mock him, at one point even hiding his car keys so he couldn't leave. After finding the keys, he left the party, only to return a little while later with a loaded hunting rifle. This somehow failed to scare the partygoers at first, but as they continued to pick on Westbrook, he opened fire, killing 5 people in less than a minute. A neighbor overheard the gunfire and went over to the house, where they observed the horrifying scene and dialed 911. Westbrook was still there when police arrived and took him into custody on suspicion of murder. During his trial, he admitted to killing the victims but claimed that it wasn't his intention to do so. He said he acted out of rage and lost self-control. As you can likely imagine, this narrative did little to garner the jury's sympathy, and Westbrook was sentenced to death by lethal injection. In his final statement before his execution in 2016, he apologized for his actions and for the pain he caused to the victims' families. 9. Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone. What started as a fun night out in Philadelphia for Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone ended in a baffling mystery that persists to this day. The couple, who were in their mid-30s at the time, had known each other since their teens and reconnected in 2005. At the time, Danielle was separated from her husband, and the new relationship's future was uncertain. But when Richard called her up and invited her out for dinner, drinks, and live music with him and some friends one evening, she took him up on the offer. The pair were last seen leaving a bar at around 11:30 p.m. with plans for Richard to drive Danielle home. Sparks had flown between the pair, and they'd already started to plan their next date. But nobody saw or heard from them ever again, and Richard's pickup truck also mysteriously vanished. When Danielle's estranged husband came by to drop off their son and she wasn't home, her family knew something was terribly wrong. Richard's relatives were also concerned because it was unlike him to remain out of touch for so long. The families immediately kicked the search into high gear, covering a 100-mile area in every direction from the couple's last known whereabouts. They even hired a helicopter to scour the area for any sign of them. Toll camera footage revealed that Richard's truck hadn't traveled on any major bridges or roadways, and not a single trace of him or Danielle ever turned up. Carjackings are common in Philadelphia, but the FBI found no evidence that this was likely to be the case. And based on the route the pair would have taken to reach Danielle's home, it seems unlikely that Richard accidentally drove into the Delaware River. In 2014, nearly a decade after they went missing, authorities conceded that they believe foul play was involved. As FBI Special Agent Vito Roselli pointed out, making two people and a truck vanish without a trace would have taken methodical planning. All signs point toward Richard and Danielle falling victim to a sophisticated murder-for-hire plot, but nobody seems to know who might have been behind it. The friends they went out with that night were eliminated as suspects, and Danielle's estranged husband Joe had an airtight alibi. And while Joe had a history of threatening Danielle and harassing Richard after finding out about the new relationship, no evidence of his involvement in the case has revealed itself. So if he was responsible in any way, he's managed to hide his tracks extremely well. More than 18 years later, investigators are left with more questions than answers and seem no closer to solving the case than they were on day one. 8. Michael McLean. 29-year-old Michael McLean was at a Nashua, New Hampshire nightclub with friends in 2019 when an altercation broke out between two women. According to initial reports, Michael knew the ladies and followed them outside as the disagreement spilled over into the parking lot. He then tried to de-escalate the fight as bystanders gathered. Other reports claim that Mike wasn't involved in the confrontation. Either way, the police showed up at some point and the crowd dispersed, but Michael was nowhere to be seen. His friends tried calling him and waited for nearly an hour before heading home at 1:45 a.m. 15 minutes later, Michael called his boss, who sometimes gave him rides home after nights out, and said, "They're after me, more than one." The man reportedly sounded panicked and out of breath. The call then disconnected, and his boss couldn't reach Michael when she tried calling him back. Around the same time, he sent a series of strange text messages to a neighbor. They read, "Help, lol, what stood aloof, and Eldridge bro." Investigators believe he may have been trying to use voice-to-text dictation and that he was referencing Eldridge Street. Michael was seen on surveillance footage at a local McDonald's restaurant at around 2:30 a.m. and was then spotted on video near an apartment complex. About an hour later, he entered and exited a parking garage. It was the last known sighting of him, and nobody ever heard from him again. His bank accounts, phone, and social media have shown no activity. On the night Michael went missing, witnesses in the town of Hudson reported hearing screams for help from across the Merrimack River in Nashua. But a search of the river turned up no trace of the missing man, and his family believes it's unlikely that he drowned because he was a strong swimmer. His loved ones are also sure that he'd never purposefully disappear without telling them where he was going. 7. Brian Brimmager and Yvonne Boundelli. Eager to start a new adventure, former US Marine Brian Brimmager and his girlfriend, Yvonne Boundelli, packed their belongings and moved from Southern California to Panama in 2011. They stayed at a hostel on a small island called Isla Carnero without a solid plan for the future, but they were content to see where life would take them. Yvonne seemed genuinely thrilled with Panama in the email she sent to her family, which described early morning runs on the beach, swimming in the ocean, and Brian's new gig playing guitar at local bars and restaurants. But within a few months of the couple's move, her loved ones began to hear less and less from her. At first, they wondered if Yvonne was just caught up in her new life in paradise, but they couldn't shake the underlying suspicion that something was wrong. They became convinced that Yvonne had been met with foul play when Brian returned to the US alone, claiming she'd run off to Costa Rica with another man. Not long after that, he got married to someone else, setting off even more alarm bells in the family's minds. The FBI learned from the couple's friends down in Panama that Brian had physically abused Yvonne. A few weeks after they arrived, people noticed on several occasions that Yvonne had facial injuries that she seemed to be trying to cover up. The feds also discovered that Brian had been in a relationship with his new wife for years, and they even had a child together. Yvonne apparently knew nothing of her boyfriend's secret life. Within days of arriving in Panama, Brian began emailing the woman, promising to return to the US and claiming that they would live happily ever after as a family. Further investigation revealed that the final emails Yvonne's family received were sent from California. Her laptop was found in Brian's apartment, indicating that he sent the emails in an attempt to make it seem like she was still alive. 2 years after Yvonne disappeared, a local resident found a duffel bag filled with her dismembered skeletal remains near the island's shore. This was finally enough evidence for law enforcement to charge Brian Brimmager with murder. Prosecutors argued that Yvonne found out about his double life and that he killed her to silence her. He pleaded guilty to the foreign murder of a US national and was sentenced to 26 years in prison, followed by 3 years of post-release supervision. Brian also admitted to destroying evidence, providing false statements to authorities, and impersonating Yvonne in the emails to her family. 6. Kyle Huff. After graduating high school and moving from Montana to Seattle in 2001, Kyle Huff and his twin brother, Kane, struggled to find their fitting on the social scene. Kyle began attending raves, where he was mostly a wallflower and didn't dance or interact much with the people around him. But he also wasn't causing any problems, so nobody seemed to mind his presence. That all changed though one night in 2006, when someone he knew from the rave scene invited him to an after party during the early morning hours. Everything went fine for a while, but then Kyle went out to his truck and retrieved several guns before heading back inside, massacring party guests along the way. As he entered the house, he reportedly said, "There's plenty for everyone." A nearby police officer overheard the gunfire and rushed to the scene, where Kyle had already claimed 6 victims out of the 30 or so people who were at the gathering. The big question surrounding the incident is why he chose to commit such a horrific act. But Kyle would never answer that question because he became a casualty of his own violence. If the police hadn't shown up when they did, it's likely that the killer would have continued shooting until he used up all 300 rounds of the ammunition that he was carrying. Witnesses who'd seen and spoken to Kyle before the incident were shocked. He showed no signs that he might become violent, and he had no identifiable reason to do so. Neighbors and his landlord described him and Kane as polite country music fans who seemed to live a normal and respectable lifestyle. To this day, it's unclear what made the young man snap, but there's certainly no doubt that he was more disturbed than he let on. 5. Edward and Stefania Andrews. One of the most baffling disappearances in Chicago history happened on the night of May 15, 1970, when Edward and Stefania Andrews attended a cocktail party at the Sheraton Hotel. The couple, who were in their early 60s, were planning to retire soon and seemed to be looking forward to the next chapter in their lives. At some point during the evening, partygoers noticed that Edward seemed ill. He had felt unwell since lunchtime that day when he told his co-workers he felt sick. Edward apparently tried to tough it out at the party, but eventually told Stefania that he wanted to leave and get something to eat. The couple left at around 9:30 p.m., at which point the parking garage manager noticed that Edward was visibly stumbling. As they drove off, the manager observed Edward behind the wheel, while Stefania appeared to be crying in the passenger seat. The vehicle then sideswept a door and then illegally went south on a northbound street. When the couple failed to show up at their jobs the following Monday, their concerned co-workers alerted authorities. Newspapers were piled up outside the Andrews home, and the only things that appeared to be missing were any personal belongings they might have taken with them to the party. There was no activity on their credit or bank accounts, and robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. Police theorized that Edward was disoriented and accidentally drove the car into the Chicago River, but numerous searches turned up no sign of the vehicle or the missing couple. In 1994, a police informant claimed that the Andrews were murdered by gangsters and that their car was submerged in a pond, but a search of the pond failed to turn up any evidence that this was the case. The pair were declared legally dead in 1978, and the case has been cold for decades. 4. Alexandra Dean. 23-year-old Alexandra Dean had just graduated from nursing school in 2016 when she attended a house party in Miami that attracted hundreds of guests. The annual event was advertised on social media as an epic gathering, like the bash in the Warner Brothers movie Project X. Sadly, things turned violent at some point in the evening when gunfire broke out, leaving Alexandra with a fatal bullet wound to the head. Investigators concluded that she was an innocent bystander and not the intended target of the shooting. No charges were brought against the homeowners, and the case still appears to be unsolved. Shortly after the tragedy, Alexandra's father called for justice for his daughter and for the perpetrator to be locked up for life. But sadly, nobody's come forward to help identify the suspect. 3. Ivona Wieczorek. One night during the summer of 2010, 19-year-old Ivona Wieczorek went to a club in the Polish city of Sopot with a friend named Adria and 3 young men that she'd known for about a month. At some point, an argument broke out among the group. Nobody knows what it was about, but surveillance footage captured Ivona running away from the club in a visibly upset state. As the sun rose a few hours later, Ivona called Adria to discuss the disagreement that had caused her to storm off. During the conversation, she said that she was heading to Adria's home and that she was a little drunk. Surveillance footage showed the young woman walking toward the neighborhood where Adria lived. When Ivona never showed up, Adria assumed she'd just gone home. But she never showed up there either, and her mum assumed she was at Adria's. Later that day, the two families realized she was missing, and sadly nobody's seen or heard from her since. In one of the security videos that showed Ivona walking, a man could be seen trailing behind her. Investigators eventually determined that they don't think he had anything to do with her disappearance. While Ivona herself has never been found, authorities finally made an arrest in the case in early 2023. After seizing evidence from the home of one of the men she was partying with at the club, known only as Powell P., investigators took him into custody. For now, they're remaining tight-lipped on the details of the case, which is being handled by a team that specializes in so-called unsolvable crimes. 2. Jacob Jaruzelski. To celebrate his upcoming wedding in 2012, Jacob Jaruzelski gathered with his buddies at a friend's house in Kansas City for his bachelor party. Sometime during the early morning hours, he got into an argument with one of the guests, and it escalated to physical blows. Police were called to the scene, where they found Jacob unresponsive on the floor. Unfortunately, he was declared dead at the scene. His friends were questioned by police, but no arrests were made. Authorities remained tight-lipped on the matter, and the exact cause of Jacob's death was never revealed, although the coroner determined that the manner of death was generalized blunt force trauma to the head and neck. At the time the story broke, investigators said that they were awaiting toxicology results and that they hadn't ruled out the possibility of filing criminal charges. But that never happened, and the story quickly went quiet in the media. 1. Music festival failure. In 2015, electronic music fans gathered in Chattahoochee Hills, Georgia for a Tomorrow World Festival, a spin-off of a highly successful Belgian event that until then had gone off without a hitch. This time was different though, and things were disastrous from the very beginning when heavy rain turned the concert grounds into a muddy mess and rendered access roads to the 8,000-acre site unusable. Further complicating things, the event's organizers limited shuttle service due to road conditions. Many attendees were left stranded, while others ended up sleeping on roadsides with no food or water. The only way to get back to civilization was to either hike 5 miles or pay for an Uber at 5 times the normal rate after hiking to a place that a car could actually get to. The next day, organizers announced that the rest of the festival's events would only be open to people who were camping on site. Most of the people who planned to attend weren't expecting to stay overnight, and while they were promised a refund, many attendees just wanted to see the show. Needless to say, that was the end of Tomorrow World in the United States. On top of the controversy the host company SFX faced for its poorly organized response to the weather in 2015, the company itself went into bankruptcy for various reasons the following year. Simply put, Tomorrow World just wasn't in the cards. And while it didn't receive nearly as much press coverage as the disastrous Firefest in 2017, it was still widely criticized in the media as a failure of epic proportions.
Number 10. Crystal Paula Gonzalez. 45 miles, 72.4 kilometers from downtown Los Angeles, in California's San Gabriel Mountains, there's a popular hiking trail that ascends a peak called Mount Baldy. Before dawn one morning in early 2023, 56-year-old mother of 4 Crystal Paula Gonzalez set off for the summit. Someone had recently fallen off the trail and died, but as an experienced hiker, she was eager to conquer the notoriously difficult climb. Shortly after Gonzalez posted a video update telling her followers that the conditions were too treacherous and she was turning back, she slipped on ice and fell 700 feet, 213.4 meters down a steep hillside and into a tree. Bystanders did what little they could to help while waiting for emergency responders to arrive, but Gonzalez died from her injuries. A helicopter evacuation of her body was impossible due to the weather, and her body had to be carried down the 10,000-foot, 3,048 meters mountain. Number 9. Rebecca Bunting. 30-year-old urban explorer Rebecca Bunting was well known for her photos of abandoned places throughout the United States. But the hobby came with risks, and in 2018 a flash flood inundated an old storm drain in northeastern Philadelphia that she was snapping pictures of with her boyfriend. Rebecca vanished when she was swept away by the raging waters of nearby Pennypack Creek, and her boyfriend called 911. He was taken to the hospital for minor injuries while authorities began searching for the missing young woman. Rebecca's body was found the next day beneath a pile of discarded furniture that had been discarded into the creek. Members of the urbex photography community from all over the world were devastated by her death. It was only after the tragedy that her closest friends and family members learned that she inspired other photographers from all over the world. But they weren't surprised, given Rebecca's curiosity and the level of dedication she approached everything in her life with. And although her life was cut far too short, she lives on through her photos and is remembered for her talent and passion. Number 8. Peter Jollers. In June of 2022, 46-year-old American adventure racer Peter Jollers traveled to the wilderness of British Columbia to participate in a competition. After the race, he went pack rafting alone in Bugaboo Creek to explore the area. When he failed to return, his girlfriend reported his disappearance to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. A search and rescue team found Peter's pack raft, but he was nowhere in sight. The missing adventurer's friends, family, and fellow competitors initially held out hope that he was still alive, even after the search was suspended due to dangerously high water conditions. By the time a second search was finally launched in early October, more than 3 months after Jules vanished, it was clear that something terrible had probably happened to him, or he wouldn't still be missing, and what had started as a rescue effort was now a recovery mission. His body was found in a log jam not far from where his raft had been discovered. Authorities launched an investigation into Peter's death, but the circumstances surrounding his disappearance were enough to indicate that he probably got into a deadly accident during his solo paddling trip. According to the non-profit American Whitewater, rafting alone and high water are common factors in fatal pack rafting accidents. And while Peter was an experienced athlete and outdoorsman, sometimes the forces of nature are too powerful for even the most skilled humans to overcome. Number 7. Jesse Capon. Legend holds that there's a rich gold mine hidden somewhere in the remote Superstition Mountains in the southwestern United States. There are different versions of the story about how, when, and by whom the mine was discovered, and where it is. Most versions claim that a German immigrant named Jacob Walt discovered a mine in Arizona sometime between the 1850s and the 1870s. No one has ever found the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, leading some to believe that it doesn't exist. But many others continue to look for it to this day, and some have died on their quest to locate it in the rugged and unforgiving desert wilderness. One of those unfortunate treasure seekers was a 35-year-old hotel worker from Denver named Jesse Capon, a quiet loner who was reportedly beyond obsessed with finding the lost mine. He kept his obsession a secret, and it wasn't until he vanished that his mom discovered evidence that he had searched for the treasure at least twice before and had amassed a collection of over 100 books about the Lost Dutchman's mine. During Jesse's third treasure hunting trip in late 2009, deputies from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office found his abandoned campsite and jeep in a place called Tortilla Mountain. Numerous searches failed to turn up any sign of Jesse himself, but on the summit of Tortilla Mountain, the Superstition Search and Rescue Group found a note in a metal canister stating, "Jesse Capon was here December 4th, 2009. The searches continued for 3 years until the group discovered a backpack full of personal belongings on the mountain. They began searching the cliffs and found a human skeleton wedged in a 35-foot, 10.7 meters crevice, which was later positively identified as the remains of Jesse Capon. Superstition Search and Rescue Director Robert Cooper told Fox News that Capon's decision to search for the treasure alone and to not tell anyone exactly where he was going were what mostly led to his death. Cooper himself doesn't believe the legend of the Lost Dutchman's mine, but he's dedicated to finding treasure hunters who go missing, and in the worst cases, bringing some semblance of closure to their families. Capon's family declined to comment after the discovery of his body, but by then she had probably come to terms with the unfortunate likelihood that her son wouldn't be coming home alive. Number 6. Cody Roman. As the son of renowned American explorer Roman Dial, Cody Roman learned his wilderness survival skills from one of the best and eventually followed in his father's footsteps. The pair embarked on numerous adventures together before Cody ventured alone into the jungles of Central America in 2014. Several months into his solo trip, the younger Roman told Dial in an email that he was heading to Costa Rica's Osa Peninsula for 4 or 5 days. When 2 weeks passed without any word from his son, Dial became extremely worried. For nearly 2 years, he searched frantically for Roman, doing everything possible to raise public awareness while following leads and searching the jungle himself. Dial would later tell National Public Radio that the US Embassy pursued leads that he didn't consider promising, including a rumor that Roman was seen walking along a trail with a drug dealer outside the area where he said he was going to be exploring. But Dial said he didn't consider it the embassy's responsibility to find his son, and he didn't seem surprised to be treated like what he described as a typical parent who didn't really know their child. A miner discovered Roman's body in 2016 in a canyon close to where Dial had camped several times during his search. After ruling out foul play, a forensic anthropologist concluded that the young man was most likely hit by a falling tree or bitten by a snake. One way or another, he was claimed by the wilderness. In his book, The Adventurer's Son, Dial described how the heartbreaking experience made him realize that he was selfish for some of the risky things he did during his 40 years as an outdoorsman. Losing his son made him painfully aware that when a thrill seeker dies, their loved ones pay the emotional price for the misadventure. Number 5. Jim Slauson. 73-year-old retiree Jim Slauson checked a major item off on his bucket list in 2020 when he participated in the Water Tribe Everglades Challenge, an annual expedition-style adventure race in the Gulf of Mexico that starts in Tampa, Florida and ends in the Keys. The 8-day event is unsupported, which means that there are no safety boats or support crews around to help the competitors, and the racers are not allowed to have anyone bring them supplies. According to the official website, only around 40% of participants finish each year. During the race, Slauson's 17-foot, 5.2 meters boat went off track from the planned route. His son alerted the Coast Guard, and a helicopter crew found the vessel capsized and with no sign of the sailor anywhere nearby. The search continued for several more days, but was eventually suspended, and Slauson was presumed lost at sea. The Coast Guard's initial announcement to the public described the adventurer as disoriented, but its exact reasons for doing so are unclear. Slauson's movement certainly suggested that something was wrong. An update posted to the event's website during the early morning hours on the day he went missing stated that his boat was way out in the Gulf and that it had been moving southwest for 6 hours at a speed of just 2 knots. Around the time Slauson vanished, other racers encountered 4 to 7 foot, 1.2 to 2.1 meters seas and 20 to 30 mile per hour, 32 to 48 kilometer per hour winds, which are considered rough conditions for a small sailboat. Although he was never found, it's probably safe to assume that his vessel was overpowered by the turbulent waves. Number 4. Fenn Treasure Hunters. Forrest Fenn was an eccentric multi-millionaire who made his fortune as an art dealer in Santa Fe, New Mexico, after serving in the Vietnam War. After being diagnosed with terminal cancer in 1988, he buried a chest full of treasures at a secret location in the Rocky Mountains, with plans to challenge members of the public to find it. He beat the disease, and it wasn't until 2010 that he mentioned the treasure's existence in a self-published memoir, along with some cryptic clues hinting at its whereabouts. A treasure hunting frenzy ensued over the next decade as fortune seekers attempted to locate the hidden cache of valuables, which, according to Fenn, included gold nuggets, rare coins, gemstones, and jewelry. Blinded by the fantasy of becoming rich overnight, many people risked their safety and broke laws. In early 2016, 54-year-old Randy Bilyeu set out to find the treasure, going against Fenn's advice not to look for it in the winter. After not hearing from him for over a week, a concerned friend alerted Bilyeu's ex-wife, who filed a missing persons report. His raft and dog were found the next day, but he was nowhere to be seen. When his body was finally found 6 months later, his ex-wife released a statement saying that she believed Randy died searching for something that doesn't even exist. She was one of many people who believed the Fenn treasure was a hoax, and these suspicions only increased as years went by without it being found. In the meantime, park authorities became exasperated by the crazed treasure hunters, and at one point they implored Fenn to end the search, but it continued, and so did the tragedies and arrests. At least 5 deaths have been linked to searches for the Fenn treasure. In 2017, a pastor from Grand Junction, Colorado, named Paris Wallace vanished after telling loved ones about his quest. Police found his car abandoned on a roadside near a torn rope, matching the contents listed on a receipt that was left in the vehicle. His body was found 5 to 7 miles, 8 to 11.3 kilometers downstream. Just weeks earlier, 53-year-old Jeff Murphy had fallen to his death while searching for the treasure in Yellowstone National Park. His body was recovered from a riverbank shortly after he disappeared, but authorities withheld details surrounding the circumstances of his death until the following year. 31-year-old Eric Ashby also went missing that summer when the raft he was traveling in with some friends overturned. His body was found a month later. The fifth and final death of a Fen treasure seeker happened in early 2020 when 53-year-old Michael Wayne Sexton and a friend rented snowmobiles and then continued their search on foot. After realizing they were in a bad situation, they tried walking far enough to get a cell phone signal and call for help, but they became trapped in deep snow. They were stuck for 4 days before rescuers arrived. By then, Sexton was dead, but his friend survived. Just a month earlier, the same pair had ended up in a similar situation and had to be rescued. Apparently, they didn't learn their lesson, and it unfortunately came at the cost of one of their lives. The Fen treasure was found later that year, much to the disappointment of those who had hoped to get their hands on it, and much to the relief of park officials who were more than ready for the crazed search to end. Number 3. Steve Fossett. Retired commodities trader Steve Fossett used some of his 8-figure fortune to set world records, circumnavigating the globe non-stop as a solo balloonist, a sailor, and a fixed-wing aircraft pilot. He held dozens of other records as an adventurer and was recognized for his achievements by numerous prestigious groups throughout the world, including America's National Aviation Hall of Fame, the Royal Aero Club of the United Kingdom, and the world's governing body of air sports, the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. Sadly, no amount of flying experience and expertise could eliminate the dangers of Fossett's thrill-seeking lifestyle. Early one morning in 2007, he took off from a private airstrip in Nevada in a single-engine 2-seater plane and failed to return by noon as planned. He filed no flight plan, which he wasn't required to do, and no location signal had been received from the plane, complicating the search for his whereabouts. Based on where they believed Fossett would have been flying and the fact that he took off with 5 hours worth of fuel, authorities began scouring the rugged wilderness of the Nevada-California border. After several weeks of looking for Fossett with no luck, the efforts were called off. During the search, 8 other previously undiscovered crash sites were found, including some that were decades old, but none were of Fossett's plane. Due to the urgency of finding Fossett, the immediate efforts to identify the wrecks were minimal. It's been speculated that one of the planes may belong to Charles Clifford Ogle, a California businessman and developer who disappeared during a solo flight in 1964. Fossett's fate remains a mystery to this day. All things considered, it's probably safe to assume that he got into an unfortunate wreck and didn't survive. Several months after he disappeared, his wife Peggy petitioned the court to have the 63-year-old legally declared dead. A Chicago judge granted her wish in early 2008, bringing a sad but not entirely unexpected conclusion to the case. Number 2. Keith Davis. Seeking an adventurous career, marine biologist Keith Davis became a fisheries observer, which involved spending months at a time on fishing vessels while collecting scientific data and monitoring the boat's activities. In addition to the dangers of rough seas, it came with other risks. Fisheries observers live and work among the crew, but are required to report any illegal activity they see, which can lead to suspicions and tensions on board, and they have extremely limited contact with the mainland. If a fisheries observer thought they were in danger, it might be difficult to call for help, especially if the captain and crew don't want them to be helped. When Davis vanished during a routine voyage off the Ecuadorian coast in 2015, his friends and family instantly suspected foul play. Carsten von Hoslen, who has worked as a marine hostage and hijacking negotiator, independently investigated the case and shared his findings with Hackeye magazine. On Davis's laptop, he found a handful of photos that looked like Davis had tried to take them without anyone noticing. It seemed as though he had been trying to document suspected crimes. The photos were taken just days before Davis disappeared, and in recent months he had become increasingly frustrated with the lawlessness he claimed to observe at sea. Some of the pictures showed 2 women, which was odd to begin with because women rarely work on tuna fishing boats. They weren't listed as crew members, nor were they dressed in the type of work attire one might expect to see on a commercial fishing vessel. Davis also photographed 2 Chinese men who were picked up from another ship belonging to the same Taiwanese company that owned the vessel he was on. The crew list indicated that the men boarded the ship 2 days apart, but Davis's photos showed them boarding at the same time. Other footage and photos showed ships packed full with extra people, including men sleeping on hallway floors. Von Hoeselen suspected that the ships Davis worked on were involved in human trafficking or smuggling. But because the ship was Panamanian flagged, the official investigation fell under Panama's jurisdiction. The probe concluded that Davis must have fallen overboard, despite the seas being calm when he went missing. Investigators failed to look nearly as deeply into the case as Von Hoeselen, and he failed to convince U.S. authorities, where Davis is from, to investigate. When he went to Ecuador to try getting anyone who knows more about what happened to talk, he hit a stone wall. The general story claims that there's no human trafficking or smuggling aboard fishing vessels, and Davis died in a tragic accident, possibly because he was drunk and lost his balance. Others seem to know more than they were saying, but either couldn't or wouldn't go into detail. Von Hoeselen and many others remain convinced that Davis was murdered, but it seems as though proving it will be next to impossible. One of the dark and disturbing advantages that come along with suspicious deaths at sea and the complicated nature of international maritime law. Number 1. Jan Bourdon. When the 27-year-old French backpacker named Jan Bourdon suddenly fell out of touch during a trip to Egypt in 2021, his loved ones suspected that he was being detained by authorities. As time wore on, the young man's family grew increasingly concerned. They desperately prodded authorities for answers, but were hit with a wall of silence. During Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's visit to Paris the following year, they went public with their pleas, holding up signs asking about Bourdon's whereabouts as the leader's motorcade rolled by in the street. Several weeks later, in August of 2022, Bourdon called his sister from the French consulate in Cairo. That same day, Egyptian state security services announced plans to facilitate his return to Paris, but they declined to reveal any details about the nature of his year-long disappearance. The mysterious case came amid a disturbing uptick in recent years of unexplained disappearances at the hands of Egyptian authorities. In 2011, a series of uprisings against police brutality and government corruption led to a change in leadership and some increased freedoms for civilians. But the changes were limited and short-lived, and since the beginning of el-Sisi's presidency in 2014, things have mostly gone back to the way they were before the 2011 revolution. Most of the people who were detained by authorities are Egyptian citizens, but the cryptic nature of Bourdon's disappearance and his sudden, unexplained return suggest that he may have been in custody during his time missing. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend 2 weeks lost in the wilderness relying on your own knowledge and skills to survive, or witness deeply concerning illegal activity that you weren't supposed to see in the middle of the ocean after paying a suspiciously low price to travel aboard a transatlantic cargo vessel? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.